Much, Christopher. Hello, everyone, and thank you for returning to part 3 of this series, Abuse in Later Life, a webinar series for civil attorneys and legal advocates. Today, we will be focusing on client goal setting and non-litigation responses. Throughout today's presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat, and Anne and I will be keeping an eye on the chat. I also just dropped the link for this module's resources into the chat. Let me drop it in again. We would love to see who is joining us today. So please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat and where you are joining us from today. I will turn it over to Anne.
Thank you, Jane. Hi, everybody, and I want to echo Jane's welcome. We are really happy that you're here. This webinar series is funded by a grant from the Office on Violence Against Women, and we want to let you know that the opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations that you hear from us are our opinions and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Office on Violence Against Women. I'm from the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life, and we are co-sponsoring this webinar with the ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence. We are the comprehensive technical assistance provider for the OVW Abuse in Later Life grant program. And we do our work as a team across the country with OVW Abuse and Later Life grantees, and also in partnerships with other organizations like the ABA. So we are super happy to have you here today.
On behalf of the ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence, I want to express my gratitude to Anne and NCALL for inviting us to present this series together. I will briefly describe some of our work and resources. The ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence is a training and technical assistance provider for attorneys who represent survivors in civil legal cases. We have a number of projects, including our Civil Litigation Skills Project, under which we provide interactive, multi-day trainings on custody litigation and trial skills and a variety of other legal topics. And we have a trauma-informed representation project, which explores what it means to be a trauma-informed legal services provider and how the organizations we work for can be more trauma informed. We also have 2 LGBTQ plus focused projects. Our Legal Access Project provides trainings on LGBTQ plus inclusivity. Those trainings are geared toward lawyers, prosecutors, and judges. And our LGBTQ plus training for coalitions project provides trainings to coalitions and their member organizations. So if you are interested in bringing a training to your organization, please reach out to us. We are funded to provide free training and technical assistance to LAV grantees and potential grantees, and we would love to hear from you. Please visit our website. It is www.americanbar.org/CDSV. I'm dropping that link into the chat to learn more about the projects that I just described and how we can help support your work.
All right. So as you can see, we are at Module 3. We're right in the middle of our webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about working with a client, setting some goals, and what are some non-litigation responses that you might be able to work with them on if litigation is not appropriate at this time. Next week, we'll jump back, or sorry, in 2 weeks, we will jump back in with legal resolutions and remedies. And then finally, on November 30th, the final module in this series is on actual trial skills. So we hope that you will join us for all of it.
I will review the learning objectives for the series. As a result of participating in this Abuse in Later Life webinar series, participants will be better able to identify and describe key dynamics of abuse in later life, effectively recognize and respond to cases of abuse in later life, access client-centered, community-based resources, and provide effective client-centered information and advocacy to abuse in later life clients.
Oops. All right, so let's jump into today's module on client goal setting and non-litigation responses. Today, what we're going to expect you guys to learn is you'll be better poised to hear your clients' priorities and goals and collaborate with them to achieve the outcomes, hopefully, that they are seeking to achieve. We're going to talk about some legal and other community-based resources that can be of use to your client and to you as you work with your client. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about multidisciplinary collaboration and how important that is when you are seeking to provide victim-centered advocacy to your client. My name is Ann Lotch. I'm the Justice System Coordinator with NCALL. And what that means is I get to work with grantees and with anybody across the country on perfecting or improving their justice system responses to abuse in later life. So we work with training civil attorneys, as we are today, prosecutors, judges, and law enforcement. We do our trainings in person and online, and we also provide general technical assistance to anybody who contacts us. So before this, I was an attorney with Legal Action of Wisconsin. So shout out to the legal action person I saw in the group today. And I worked in the senior law project. So I worked with older victims of crime. And I'm super happy to be here with you guys today. I'll let Jane introduce herself.
Thank you, Anne. My name is Jane Zai. I am the managing attorney with the American Bar Association Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence. I've been with the ABA for the past 7.5 years. Prior to joining the ABA, I was a legal aid attorney. I represented survivors in domestic violence order protection cases and family law matters. At the ABA, I coordinate national trainings. I work on tools and resources for civil attorneys, and we also provide individualized support or technical assistance to civil attorneys who represent survivors and their organizations. And I'm very happy to be here today. Some quick housekeeping matters. We ask that you please mute yourselves when you are not speaking. We ask that you please participate by adding your comments and questions in the chat box. I see that we have had a lot of folks introduce themselves in the chat. That is great. And we hope you will continue to engage with us in the chat throughout today's program. So a couple of weeks ago, during Module 2 of the series, we introduced the concepts of meeting with and forming a relationship with your client in a trauma-informed, client-centered way. We discussed some signs for power and control that might appear when you are speaking with a client about the reasons they have come to your office. And we also gave some considerations around privacy, confidentiality, and privilege, and what your duties are when working with clients. Today, we will start with a quick review of client-centered representation. Our role as attorneys and advocates is to help our clients navigate legal systems, many of which are very complicated and disempowering and not accessible to lay individuals and sometimes attorneys to achieve their goals. To do so, we must engage in holistic, client-centered work in which the client is the driver of our professional work from start to finish. Client-centered work is led by our clients and their goals, wishes, judgment, and desires. Client empowerment does not mean that we need to relinquish our professional judgment or obligations. For example, attorneys should be mindful that regardless of their views about the client's decisions or what they think should happen, attorneys have a duty to provide zealous representation of their clients within the confines of ethical practice. So, what are some examples of client-centered work? When working with survivors, that means taking the time to simply and clearly explain what confidentiality means for your client and explaining what your work and your representation for the client will be and will not be. It means allowing the client to make decisions for themselves, that even decisions that you believe you would not make for yourself. Ageism is clearly rampant in our culture, and I think there is a common belief that seniors cannot make decisions for themselves. We must remember that even if our client is older, we should not and cannot substitute our judgment for their judgment. Fundamentally tied to this concept is the important role of communicating with our client. We are ethically obligated to ensure that we can communicate effectively with our client by taking enough time in one or more client meetings to learn the facts of the case and also to learn about our client's goals, to address our client's culture and engage in culturally aware representation, to address language barriers and engage with interpretation services when appropriate, to empower our clients and to be client-centered in our work. We need to understand our clients' goals. Sometimes it's difficult to remember that our clients are whole individuals who likely have short-term goals and long-term goals. Their legal needs and goals may be a part of the overall objectives, but oftentimes the legal needs are not their only needs. So holistic client-centered representation focuses on those other needs as well, the non-legal needs. And we need to be prepared to refer our clients to non-legal services for support to help them on their journeys toward achieving their life goals. So both short-term goals and long-term goals. It is our duty to create strong referral networks in advance of working with clients so we know that those referrals are safe and accessible to our clients before making any referral. This framework is also a helpful reminder that our work with clients is about their lives, their dreams, and their needs, and not about us as their legal and non-legal advocates. It is a privilege to be an educated attorney or advocate who understands the legal system, and we are using our professional skills to help our clients. This framework is always a useful reminder that our clients need to drive their own cases and our representation and not the other way around. And it might be difficult to shift that framework since legal work is goal-driven by deadlines, by desired outcomes, but it is essential to client empowerment. So how do we do this? I am trying to go to the next slide. Thank you. From the outset of our professional relationship with our client, we need to practice client-centered work. This means that starting with the first meeting, we need to establish the confidentiality of our conversations so that clients feel safe sharing difficult and personal matters. We need to ask our clients, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And we need to continue to ask our clients if their goals, their needs, and what they want has changed as our relationship builds and as litigation progresses. We need to consistently explain the posture of their case and our work on their behalf in plain language or lay terms so that our clients can make informed, educated decisions affecting our work on their behalf. As legal advocates, We can help our clients clarify their goals and set expectations that comport with the realities of the legal system by communicating clearly about how the legal system works, what it can accomplish, and what it cannot accomplish, and allowing our clients to guide our work through that framework. Although, as previously mentioned, attorneys must maintain their ethical obligations to the court, the vast majority of legal decisions still must be driven by the client. One way of thinking about this is the taxi analogy. We are the taxi drivers. Our clients tell us where they want to go, and then it is our job to take them there. They can say, take the freeway or don't go down a certain street, and we need to listen to them. We can explain to the client that there is freeway traffic at this hour, but ultimately their decision is what we do. And why is that? Because it is the client's case, it affects their life. Very importantly, related to this is the fact that many of our clients' needs may be non-legal and require remedies outside of the legal system. We must be prepared to provide pre-screened, well-trained, competent referrals to our clients for their non-legal needs as well. So that includes social workers, medical providers, support groups, and community organizations. How can you determine your client's goals? As you can see on the screen, there are many different approaches and tools that we can use to assess our clients' goals. It is imperative to recognize that each client or survivor is unique, and clients come to us with different priorities, needs, and life circumstances. Practitioners also Practitioners always need to determine their clients' goals, but the questions we ask and the approach we use will be different depending on the client's needs and life circumstances. So in order to determine a client's goals, you can ask open-ended questions, allowing the client to drive the conversation and tell you what their priorities are. You can explain confidentiality and privilege so that the client understands that you will not share their information with others pursuant to the ethical rules and that they can trust you. And you can set clear expectations by being honest about what the legal process can and cannot accomplish. By being honest about the limits of the legal process, you can help your client set achievable goals and manage their expectations. You can provide sufficient time to meet with your client. This will ensure that your client has enough time to make informed decisions about their goals and build sufficient trust to support an open and honest attorney-client relationship. Ensure that your communications with your client are accessible. Different client populations, including older clients, face many communication barriers when seeking legal services, including being limited English proficient or non-English proficient, deaf or hard of hearing, or experiencing a myriad of disabilities, which can include physical and cognitive disabilities. All of those things can make it difficult for clients to understand legal advice, communicate their goals, or make informed decisions. It is the ethical duty of attorneys to accommodate their clients' needs by screening for and providing interpreters and translation services, as well as providing any other accommodations that are necessary to ensure effective client communication between the attorney and the client. Attorneys should also continue communications throughout the client relationship about those goals. They may change throughout the representation for many reasons, such as new incidents of abuse that have taken place, the client's health condition, and many other circumstances. As such, it is imperative to continue communicating with your client about their goals, even after the initial client meeting. Again, their goals may change, and the means by which they want to achieve those goals may also change. As such, it is important for attorneys to create a trusting relationship with a client in which the client may raise new issues as they arise. Because clients come from many different cultures and backgrounds, it is also critical that attorneys allow the client's culture to inform the work, and they should observe if their own culture or biases are infusing their perceptions of the client or the client's goals. And finally, attorneys should always seek training to be better able to work within a client-centered framework, particularly as the issues and lives of communities experiencing abuse in later life continue to evolve and change. You can reach out to Anne and the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life, or my team at the ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence, in addition to the American Bar Association Commission on Law and Aging, who we work closely with for additional resources. Although these resources listed on this slide are national in scope, we can serve as a starting point for a more localized search. It is very important to remember that individuals who are experiencing abuse in later life face many different legal issues, and you, as one attorney or advocate, may not have the technical expertise to address every legal issue affecting your client's life. There are several outside resources that can be very helpful for clients who need legal advice and or help with issues related to elder abuse. These include organizations that offer landlord-tenant legal services, your local legal aid office. It might be helpful for you to develop that relationship if it does not already exist. Victim or witness offices within the prosecutor's office may be able to provide additional support to your client. And also listed on this slide are the phone numbers for the National Domestic Violence Hotline and the National Sexual Assault Hotline. There are also legal resources for attorneys who represent survivors of abuse in later life, such as womenslaw.org, which is a wonderful resource that provides jurisdiction-specific information. I know that when I was practicing, I frequently consulted the womenslaw.org website. Many state attorney general offices may have elder services units focused on civil financial exploitation and recovery. And you may already know of other local resources, or that's something you can do homework around. So not only can you provide safe, vetted referrals or warm handoffs for your clients, but they may also be able to serve as a resource for you. And I will now pass it back over to Anne.
Thank you, Jane. All right. So abuse in later life cases can obviously be complicated for many of the reasons that Jane just talked about. And as an attorney, you are in the position to recognize and address those cases and to work collaboratively with your client to identify their specific needs, to prioritize their goals, and then to help them achieve their desired outcomes in their case. In addition to seeking whatever available civil and or criminal legal remedies that might be available to your client, you may also want to consider some non-legal responses as part of that goal setting process. For example, you may need to refer your client to other agencies, other service providers, or individuals who can help older victims. You may also need to work collaboratively with other professionals to address abuse in later life on a more systemic level in your jurisdiction. Your client, I think it's important to remember that your client might identify a number of goals that they have when they come to you and are seeking help. That might include becoming independent of the person who's abusing them, or maybe not. A lot of times I know in my head, when I would be working with somebody who is being abused, when I was a lot younger and new at this, I was like, oh, okay, they're hurting you, then you have to leave. And that doesn't recognize the many, first of all, that's not victim-centered, obviously, and it doesn't recognize the many reasons that somebody may not want to leave and may feel tied to this person or this family relationship. And maybe what they really want is for the abuse to stop, but to stay with that person. So you need to just be really clear about the benefits and then the risks of every option with your client and let them identify their priorities for that case. So we are going to launch a poll right now, and it's going to show a list of resources. And we'd just like you to identify which of the following resources are available in your community that you know about. So you can check all that apply, and just curious to know which are available that you know of in your jurisdiction. And we'll give you guys a minute to go through the list because it's kind of long. Super interesting. All right. Just watching them come in, it looks like most folks have domestic violence services. That's great. Healthcare services, fewer are familiar with the aging network or even know that they have ready access to one. So just be aware that these are some of the other entities and people and agencies in the community that your client might be leaning on or might be looking to for support, like family and friends, or may be engaged with before they even get to you. So, all right, excellent. Thank you. Stop sharing. All right. Now, as part of your work, I'm just curious if you have ever referred a client to any of those agencies that we just read about or any of those external organizations. There were a lot of them. So, all right, looks like everybody has. Look at all you victim-centered lawyers and advocates out there. Amazing. Awesome. All right, looks like 100%. Nice. Thanks, guys. So you're already familiar with the importance of knowing what resources are available in your community, knowing what they do, which I think is huge. You can know that they exist, but maybe not specifically how they may be able to help an older client, or if they have services that are specifically geared towards older survivors of abuse. So it's good to know you're making use of them. Today, we're going to talk through some of those that you may not be familiar with, but this is kind of the constellation of organizations and entities that an older person may already be working with. In the next few slides, we're going to go through the agencies, victim service organizations, and groups that might already be involved in helping a victim of abuse in later life, or that might be an appropriate referral source for you. And in general, some additional information and resources on finding local organizations can be found with the National Center on Elder Abuse has a great state resources list, that's NCEA. The Department of Justice Elder Justice Initiative also has, and I can, when I'm done talking, drop some links into the chat, has some really great local resources for you guys. So we will give you some of those when we are done going through this. I want to talk first about the importance of making warm referrals. This was a phrase that was new to me when I started at NCALL, and I kind of love it. But basically what it means is when you know your client needs something, like maybe they're really struggling with what's been going on and they need some emotional mental health support. So maybe you want to refer them to an organization or to an individual for that, as an example. What a warm referral means is that you're not just going to say, okay, Jane, you should call this person because they're really terrific. I think you'll really like working with them, and they can work with you to address all these concerns that are coming up for you right now. That's great. But what's even better is if you can talk to the service provider before you refer your client, let them know that you're going to refer them, and maybe a little bit about them if they've given consent. And then provide either a verbal, personal, in-person introduction or a phone introduction, or at least a written introduction. So you're making that handoff rather than just handing them a phone number. And then don't just kind of one and done it. Don't just assume they're going to call and it's going great, but follow up and see how that referral worked out. You may decide that if it isn't going well, the client may be reluctant to tell you about that. So if you ask, you can get feedback about the resource. And if it didn't work out well for the client, maybe you're going to want to reconsider sending that person over to them or over to that particular resource in the future. Oh, thank you, Jane. I just wanted to take a look at the chat and make sure that, yes, we're going to talk about accessible services too. There's a point in the chat that of what's missing in some of your communities, but also that, yes, one big frustration that I and probably everybody on this call has is that folks, everybody is understaffed, right, and overworked, and especially nonprofit organizations. And often, yes, a place will exist and will be appropriate for your client, but it might be really hard to connect them. That is really a universal experience. And I think it's really common in legal aid as well, that I know from working in the legal aid world that you're never going to have enough attorneys to do the work that you want to do, and you cannot take every case. And it was really frustrating to have to tell folks, like, yes, what you're telling me is valid. You definitely have a case, but I'm going to have to work really hard to find resources for you. So just want to name that and acknowledge that, because I'm sure it's a common experience for you guys. As we start talking about the resources that we commonly would refer people to, I am going to talk first about adult protective services. I think that when you're working with older adults, this is probably the entity that you want to know the most about, and you want to have a really good relationship with them. I know that when I work in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and when I was working with senior law, we would always go to the the Adult Protective Services M-team meetings, the multidisciplinary team meetings, and the financial abuse specialty team meetings, because we wanted to know what was going on, what those entities were seeing, but also what resources they could provide to support our clients. So APS across the country may have different names, but it is an investigatory, protective, and social service provider, generally to abused, neglected, or exploited older and or vulnerable adults or at-risk adults. Again, the definition of who they serve is going to be determined by statute, and it may differ from place to place, but generally APS agencies provide support to victims by connecting them with services and making necessary referrals, for example, to a DV, sexual assault program, meal program, financial support, those kinds of things. Many APS workers can provide case management. Others may just be more of a navigator and make referrals. But depending on your state law and state confidentiality guidelines, APS workers may report suspected elder abuse crimes to law enforcement. Just want to note that APS is typically administered by the state or county human services department or aging agencies. In almost all states, a huge array of professionals including doctors, nurses, law enforcement, social workers, aging and disability service providers are mandated to report any suspicion of vulnerable adult abuse, neglect, or exploitation to APS. I can't speak to everybody's statutes, so you need to be familiar with your own mandatory reporting statutes, but your jurisdiction may include lawyers among the list of mandatory reporters. So be aware of those mandatory reporting requirements, and obviously be sure to inform your client of those at the beginning of your consultation with them. The Aging Services Network includes professionals and volunteers, very important, who lend ongoing support and services to older adults. Those services can play a critical role in breaking the isolation that many older adults and older victims experience. We know that isolation is one of the top risk factors for abuse in later life. So just having that connection to someone who's coming in and providing care, or someone who is delivering meals. One of the great memories that I have of my grandfather is going around. He drove for Meals on Wheels. In hindsight, he probably shouldn't have been, because he did it until he was pretty old and not the best driver, but he got such joy. I think it was great because it got him out, and he loved the folks that he delivered meals to, and it was, you can just see how it helps to address isolation. Other services available might include transportation assistance, in-home care, nutrition services, health prevention and wellness programs. And I think the reason that these aging service programs can be such critical resources when we're trying to respond to and identify abuse in later life is that they are seeing that older adult weekly in many cases, or pretty often. They're seeing them regularly over time. So they're going to really be able to tell you if something has changed in that person's life, or if the kind of care that they're getting has changed, that sort of thing. So we love the Aging Network. Another resource in your community, and this is going to be different because every community is different, are culturally specific programs and community centers that provide services and supports and programming to individuals within given communities. So some older victims may be reluctant to contact law enforcement or an attorney or social services or the more mainstream domestic violence programs, but they may feel comfortable reaching out for assistance from a culturally specific DVSA program or other organizations that advocate for the communities with which they identify. Some of those are listed here on the slide. While some of those programs might not provide specific victim services like we're talking about, they may provide other support services and just a community space where, which can be a viable and more comfortable environment for your client to receive support and services, just because it's familiar. When you're working with older victims, you may also have to identify organizations or individuals that specialize in working with older victims who have unique needs and experiences. So in your own community, you can ask yourself, who specializes in working with people who have physical limitations? Is there someone who specializes in working with individuals who have cognitive limitations, who are deaf or hard of hearing? Is there an LGBTQ support group for seniors, for older adults, or immigrants? Just good to kind of look at your specific community and think about who are the large groups of folks that are represented and what are the resources that are available for them. Domestic and sexual violence programs, I think, exist pretty widely. And as you all no doubt know, they are community-based criminal justice and criminal justice system-based programs that can offer an array of services to older victims. So you might have somebody from a shelter or a program that is outside the criminal justice system, or you may be working with an advocate, a domestic violence or sexual assault advocate within, say, the prosecutor's office or the police department. Lawyers should be sure to connect with those domestic violence, sexual assault programs to determine how prepared they are to provide services to older individuals. We know that the world is getting a little more friendly to older adults, probably because the population is aging and it's going to continue to age. But it's still really hard to go to a shelter, for example, and find that it is 100% open and welcoming and accessible for an older adult, because oftentimes when we think about what a victim of domestic violence looks like, if you close your eyes and picture that person, you're not always thinking about an older woman or an older man. So find out which of these programs have specific programming for older adults. We are fortunate in Milwaukee. We have a support group that has been going for many years for older abused women. And we have shelters that have reserved space for older adults. But as anybody who has worked in a shelter can tell you, they are often chaotic places that are full and often with lots of kids around, and may not be what an older survivor might wish for when they're thinking about a space to heal and recover. Oh, I want to mention too that DV and SA advocates can also work with your client oftentimes to assess the benefits and the risk of all the options available to them, and then to create a safety plan. Safety planning is so important. We've talked about that in previous modules of this training series. But that is something that if you have a checklist of when you're working with clients, having a safety plan is huge, and advocates are just terrific at that. Faith-based organizations, domestic violence and sexual assault programs can also offer alternatives, including crisis and long-term resources. Maybe they'll see them through the initial crisis, but they may be able to provide support in an ongoing way at no cost. And then the safety planning issue is just hugely important. Now, faith-based organizations. For some older adults, their faith community is a really, really important resource in their lives. Faith-based organizations in your community are important to know about when you're working with older victims of abuse, because faith can really hold a central place in the lives of many older adults. And it might be an essential element for them in their decision-making and their healing. And they may very well want to partner with a faith leader as they're figuring out their next steps and where they see themselves in the future. Spiritual leaders can also be trusted supports and may very well be the first place a victim or family member turns for help. But of course, we want to acknowledge that not all older adults may be connected to a faith community, but it is worth finding out if they are. NCALL on our website, we also have a bunch of resources for faith communities and how they can best position themselves to respond to abuse in later life. And if that's something you're interested in, send me an email and I can make sure that you get that. Healthcare providers can also provide a safe and secure care setting for patients. Many older adults, I feel like I am this older adult now, don't want to change doctors because they love their doctors, and they may have very well had the same doctor for a very long time. So that might be another person who can give you more of a longitudinal assessment of what your client's condition is and how it may have changed in light of the abuse. Generally, they are also mandated reporters. Healthcare providers can help you with capacity assessments, which is huge. If you have concerns about working with somebody and you're not 100% sure about their capacity and where that's at, you may be able to connect with them or recommend a capacity assessment. And then again, they're going to be documenting their observations and their medical findings. So if you are looking at a case over time, they're a great resource to tell you if the person's condition has changed or if there was a point in time where things really got different for that individual. If your client needs assistance with personal care and with basic personal tasks of everyday living, you might need to work with them and connect them with the long-term care service providers and facilities in your community, like nursing homes, assisted living facilities, or other residential programs. The long-term care ombudsman in your community are terrific resources, and they are advocates who work with residents of nursing homes, care homes, and similar adult care facilities. And they're really there to advocate on behalf of the resident. So it isn't, it's different than just calling the administrator of a residential facility. You're really bringing in somebody who's partnering with that client. They're trained to resolve problems. They can provide information ahead of time on how to find a facility and what to do to get the best care possible. They can assist with complaints or concerns about the nursing home or assisted living facility. They're also required to keep concerns confidential unless they are given permission to share that information with another agency or another person. Under the Older Americans Act, every state is required to have an ombudsman program, and they address complaints and advocate for improvements in the long-term care system as well. So really a terrific and often underutilized resource. Sometimes an abuser is going to continue to be abusive or exploitive even after an older adult client has moved into a facility. And as an attorney, it's important to keep in mind that this is a possibility, and to, if possible, work collaboratively with that long-term care provider and the many other professionals that we've been talking about to continue to help your client to achieve their desired outcome. And keep in mind that again, your client may not wish to become independent of the abuser. They may want to maintain contact. If they go into a residential care facility, they may want that person to be able to visit them. So it's really going to be important to discuss the benefits and the risks of all options with your client and let them identify the priorities for their case. I want to look at, oh, thank you, Jane. I just want to, oh, I love that there is a legal case manager at the DVSA shelter. Yes, if you are lucky enough to have a family justice center in your community. I know in Milwaukee, we have one where the DA's office, sensitive crimes, the domestic violence shelter, legal services are all under one roof. And it is such a great thing. Some really, really good comments. Thank you, guys. I love when people use the chat. So, oh wait, I got ahead of myself. Let's see. We talked about the ombudsman. So because abuse in later life can and does take an emotional toll on a victim, your client may also need the support of a mental health provider, like we mentioned before. Mental health professionals and counselors can diagnose mental health conditions. They can provide ongoing psychological care and treatment. For some older victims, a mental health assessment might be needed, as we mentioned, to determine whether they're capable of meeting their own basic needs, about making decisions for services, offering testimony, or protecting themselves against abuse. And these counselors can be really helpful with that. And then additionally, making a referral to a substance abuse service provider might be useful to a victim of abuse in later life. If your client has a physical or cognitive impairment that results from substance abuse, that can make them more vulnerable to abuse or exploitation. They might really benefit from a referral to a substance abuse counselor. Like that can really go hand in hand to addressing the abuse. A substance abuse counselor can also evaluate and treat your client if they themselves have a substance abuse problem, and also provide them with a number of services for chemical dependency. Local substance abuse service providers who are very sensitive to issues of abuse in later life can be located by contacting your local DVSA program, area agency on aging, or adult protective services, if you don't know of any who specialize in that off the top of your head. And then there are a number of social service agencies in every organization that provide advocacy and support around a range of areas. So you're going to find entities that may provide short-term financial assistance, help with job finding, food and nutrition programs, housing assistance, eviction assistance, medical and healthcare services. Every community, as you know, is different and will have a different range of these. But one thing I just think the takeaway here is that it's really good to be aware of the services that exist in your community, and in particular, those that have programming or services that are specific to older adults. So one thing you can do if you're new in this area, or you want to be ready to serve an older victim, if you get somebody coming to you for assistance, is you can create your own little sample resource chart. I think we put the template in the materials for today. Now this was my old one, so this is based on my community, but you can kind of create your own and drop in what the resource is, what they do, who it is, how do you contact them, what is their website, maybe note the services that they provide. But it's just a good way to have sort of your, resources for older survivors in one place. And I think that we're going to get more into this as we talk about collaboration, but I think it's really terrific if you can build a relationship with some of them ahead of time, so that when you need something or you want to connect one of your clients, they're going to say, oh yeah, hey, Anne, I remember you from that meeting. How can I help you? So just kind of a one-stop shop for putting those somewhere if you like. Let's pivot a little bit and talk about collaboration, which is a really broad term to describe various ways to work with others towards a shared goal. Because abuse in later life cases can be so complex, collaboration among the various professionals across disciplines is really crucial to the success of any case. As your client's attorney, you may need to work with other professionals to address your client's needs around abuse in later life. Collaborative efforts may be formal, so structured, scheduled meetings with, appointed or selected participants, memoranda of understanding, those are more formal collaborative efforts. And then there's just informal collaboration where you're working together on a project, or it's as needed, or you decide you just want to get together and create a new resource together. Regardless, I think that it's just an essential piece of working with older survivors. So in addition to making referrals, and I'll just have you guys drop some answers in the chat here. I'm really curious as to what are some ways that you can collaborate with other professionals to help a client who is a victim of abuse in later life? So I'm not talking about a referral to a service provider. I'm talking about a collaboration. And just I'll kind of state the most obvious, and then I would look forward to seeing your responses in the chat. But maybe you're going to participate on a case review team. Maybe you have an EMDT, an enhanced multidisciplinary team that works on cases of abuse in later life. It would be great to be involved in that, and then you can take your client's case to that MDT and say, look, I'm really struggling to find these resources for my client. Can you guys give me any pointers? And see what that team has to say. So that would be one example. Let's see what else we got here. M-Team, EMDT, thank you. Thanks, Grace. Joint outreach. Yes, I think we can't overstate how important it is to ideally minimize the number of times that your client's going to have to tell their story. So if you're doing outreach with them, with another social worker, and they're going to interview your client as well, if you've got a release and your client is fine talking to both of you, that can be really, really victim-centered. I've helped victims with impact statements in criminal cases. Perfect. I'm so happy to see that many of you are connected with an EMDT. Take the client to meetings if possible. Yes, that is terrific. Keep others informed of the progress or barriers. Oh, wonderful. Look at all you EMDT folks. Joining newsletters and training committees to offer topical ideas and context for speakers for events like World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Fantastic. I think just letting, if you get really good at this and you're making connections in the community, and you're going to be recognized and people are going to remember, like, I know that Jane was really helpful the last time I called her for help with a client. I'm going to call her again. So building those relationships is just invaluable. Wonderful. And I'm so glad civil attorneys should be on every EMDT in my opinion. So I referred before to methods of collaboration. Some of those can be some informal means of collaboration that are client specific, could be conducting that joint interview or case consult and going with the client. And then working on a joint project, like somebody mentioned, an awareness day project. Maybe you want to get together with an organization and host a webinar for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, that kind of thing. All that relationship building is so, so critical. And then thank you all for being involved in these. If you aren't involved with an MDT or an EMDT or an I team, we strongly recommend that. So some of you might be involved in your coordinated community response teams, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide. But these collaborations, these collaborative partnerships that you see on the slide now are all for case review. So they are places where you can bring a case that is vexing to you. And I'm just assuming that because you're all really good, smart lawyers, you're going to handle the confidentiality aspects of this. But I think that it's a really great place to kind of bring get multiple opinions on what you could do, provide some additional resources. Maybe people are going to think of an approach that you hadn't considered yourself. There are also sexual assault response teams that work on reviewing cases of sexual assault. And then elder abuse forensic centers are another resource. They are less common in communities, but they are another collaboration that can really take a case and take a look at it and apply, the expertise of everybody who's around the table. So those are methods of collaboration that are really focused on case review of specific cases. There are others that are more focused on systems change. And I'd love to know in the chat if any of you guys participate with your CCR. A coordinated community response team is a multidisciplinary collaborative that works in a particular jurisdiction or area and that works to identify places in the system where older survivors of abuse are falling through the cracks. And where do entities need to be working together better or more efficiently to make sure that older survivors are served? So they're not dealing with individual cases. You're not going to go to them with your case. But if you're seeing a problem over and over, like, this entity never is not accessible, or this entity never provides interpretation when we need it, or just finding out that there are places where referrals could be made, but they're not being made because the entities don't know about one another. Those sorts of things that are those systemic issues are handled by a CCR. There are also fatality review teams, elder abuse fatality review teams, which review cases where elder abuse has been determined to be a cause of death or related cause, contributing cause, and what they're kind of looking retroactively and determining if there are things that could have been done for that individual, services that could have been provided, or things that didn't happen that could have kept them safer. So, and then finally, you will find topic specific collaborations that are not case specific, but that may be looking system-wide. I know that many of you may be familiar with FAST teams, the financial abuse specialist teams. They're usually going to bring together civil attorneys, APS, banking, financial services entities who are going to talk about what they're doing to prevent fraud and financial exploitation, and then how they're responding and how they're referring those folks on for services when it does happen to them. I think given the rapid increase in the numbers and kinds of scams that are out there right now, cyber crimes and financial crimes, it's just, we all know how quickly it's growing. I think FAST teams are getting a little bit more well-known, but it's worth connecting with yours locally if there is one. Some of these collaborations can be challenging. So it's not to say that it's all sunshine and rainbows when you try to collaborate with somebody, because especially in these formal partnerships, the folks around the table might have conflicting strategic goals that need to be reconciled before you can move forward. The reason that they're around the table might be a little bit different. You may all have variations, different ethical or reporting obligations. So what happens if you're talking about a case and somebody is a mandated reporter and the person presenting the case isn't? That sort of thing. How are you going to handle that? You're going to anonymize that case, right? But you're going to have to deal with that. And I think it's a good idea to address that before you ever, come around the table. And then obviously everybody sitting around the table is going to have a different kind of confidentiality or privilege that is applying to them. So those are some things to consider in advance before you start engaging with a formal collaboration. And there also may be, we know that people are human, and people who work in agencies are human, and sometimes there may be a history of conflict between a particular people or agencies that they just don't work well together. You also don't want to be duplicating services or resources, and instead, ensure that you're all walking in the same direction, but not stepping on toes. So those are some of the challenges. From your perspectives, what are some of the benefits of collaborating in one of these formal collaborations? Just would love to hear what you guys have to say in the chat. I'd love to hear, especially from some of you guys who are on EMDTs or CCRs. What's awesome about them? Finding out about new resources, right? I think that's huge and really, really important. I think related to that, you can get a more complete picture of a client's needs if you are hearing from professionals who have different perspectives, right? I think that's the biggest thing to me, is that you have an idea about your client and where you want things to go and how you're going to handle this representation. But you might talk to somebody who's got a totally different perspective and might spur you to think about alternatives that you hadn't considered. Being able to coordinate services that serve the client as a whole, fantastic. Keeping abreast of the capacities of various organizations is huge. They may be doing really great work and not able to accept new clients. They may be offering new programming you didn't know about. You may be able to resolve issues that you wouldn't have known about. Coordinating. Oh, I love that. I'm new to elder law, so I'm learning the area of law more quickly by being on these teams. Terrific. Knowing what service they can provide, getting the full picture. Supporters for legislation, that is huge. Yeah, and I think just that relationship building, like let's say you are lucky enough to be able to lobby in your position. If you're working on an EMDT and somebody is proposing something great and you are legally allowed to go lobby, they might say, hey, I know you're on the front lines. Maybe you can help us with this legislation. Like that's really, really good. Excellent. Love this. Love all your answers. Thank you. Let's see if I got anything on my notes that you didn't talk about. Yeah, I think increased ownership and responsibility for case outcomes is huge. Like you have other people that are aware of the case and that are trying to support you, and that are going to have an interest in that case being successful. Less duplication of services and enhanced victim safety. Really good. So some of the challenges that we talked about can be resolved if you are able to develop some ground rules at the beginning of this collaboration and set some parameters for discussion. Like this stuff is all on the table. This stuff is not on the table because of X, Y, and Z. Just have those ground rules and expectations and review them on a regular basis. And then it can be super helpful to consider drafting an MOU that formalizes expectations and rules for partners. Like, Ann Lodge from NCALL is going to be on this EMDT, and here's what we can offer, and here are the limitations of our participation. And again, review those from time to time so everybody is aware of what other folks' involvement is and what it can't be. Oh, that's me. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Jane.
This slide is directed to the attorneys in the audience. As attorneys, we are in a position of leadership, whether we want to be or not, and we hold some power and privilege to help improve safety and outcomes for our clients. And we have much to offer our clients to support them, and our support can extend beyond legal assistance. You can help your clients in the following way: helping survivors clarify their goals and their expectations, referring clients to resources and services outside of your practice area for holistic care. That includes both legal resources and non-legal resources and services, many of which we discussed today. Educating yourself about elder abuse and recognizing the signs of elder abuse, including participating in this series, coordinating with the other local and state actors engaged in this work so that your community response to elder abuse is victim-centered, culturally informed, and holistic. Showing up at community-based events and thinking about ways to reach people in your community who you have not been able to reach traditionally, and providing public education for staff or clients and other community members. Before we open it up for more questions, I will briefly review some key teaching points for today's module, which was engage in victim-centered collaboration, meaning keeping the victim or survivor at the center of collaborative discussion between partners, gaining understanding of what our role is, and making sure that any referrals are safe and appropriate for helping move the client forward to achieving the goals as defined by them. And two, promote safety and survivor victim autonomy. What can we do to help our clients make the decisions that are right for them and their lives? That may include educating your clients, recognizing that they are the experts in their lives and what will keep them safe, and ultimately empowering them to make decisions and giving back some of the power they may have lost. I am again having trouble going to the next slide. We will ask all of our participants to please use the chat to ask any other questions that you have.
I love the collaboration happening in the chat right now. I'll keep an eye on the chat if we just want to keep going if folks have questions.
Sounds good. I will provide a little preview of what we will be covering in Module 4, which is 2 weeks from today. Module 4 is focused primarily on legal content, although practitioners from all fields are welcome to attend. Topics will include identifying and applying available civil and legal remedies, effectively applying the remedies identified, effectively advocating within the civil justice system, and building effective collaboration with other system actors. And Anne, did we get any questions?
Just one question. Somebody had offered to share information about stopping wire transfers as one of the ways that they were able to help a client. So if that is some information that you would like to share with the other attendees, if you want to email it to Jane or me, we can make sure that it gets out to everybody who attended today. So I think that was Kelsey. So Kelsey, if you want to shoot one of us an email, our info is on the slide. And then another question, what is the session after November 13th? Wait, I got to get back to the schedule. So the next one is in 2 weeks, and then the one after that is in 1 week because they've been 2 weeks apart. So the next session will be on November 13th, and then the 20th is when we're going to be talking about litigation strategies. And that one's only a week. They're only a week apart. So just so you are aware, we didn't want to run into Thanksgiving. So, any expertise on how to reach out to? Yes. We have a rural toolkit, and I'm going to, sorry about the barking dog. I'm gonna get a link to that right now, that we just updated, and it is called Resource for Working with Older Survivors in Rural Communities. So let me drop this link in the chat. Hang on one sec. And then it's a PDF that you can download. Yes, Montana is vast, and you have a really big Senate race going on right now. I appreciate you asking that because this is a terrific resource that we are pretty proud of. We also have, let me just put a link to our publications library. There is, broken down by topic, we have a lot of resources like the Rural Toolkit that are available for you guys to download. We try to keep them really up to date, so we're constantly revising them and making sure that they're still relevant. But the other thing I would say is if there's something that you're looking for that you don't see, please shoot me an email and we can probably track it down for you. I don't see any more questions. I just want to thank everybody for your time today and for being here. We always enjoy doing this series, and I love all your participation and your commitment and your passion around this issue. So thank you for being here. Please email Jane or me if there's something that you need and didn't see. Otherwise, we hope to see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.